Hey everyone, thinking about getting some eco-friendly tires for your next set? Well, we did a deep dive into this, and
It's more complicated than it seems.
yeah, it is way more than just like, a recycled sticker slapped on. There's some real,
Supply chain craziness.
exactly, supply chain chaos. There's like pollutants you wouldn't even believe.
Even salmon are involved.
Wait, what? Salmon?
Oh, yeah. In
Yeah.
Seattle, even.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued now. So, to understand this whole eco-friendly tire thing,
We got to start with the basics. The whole tire industry, they need natural rubber. And, well,
natural rubber is not exactly the most reliable thing, is it?
not really. It's not just about the price going up and down either.
Okay, so what kind of instability are we talking about here? Give me an example.
Imagine Apollo Tires, a big manufacturer. India's car market, it's booming, right? They need tons of tires.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But to make tires, they need a steady supply of that natural rubber. And lately, not
Yeah.
so steady.
Ah, so this is where the supply chain issues come in. I know you mentioned something about like Thailand and Indonesia.
Exactly. Those two, they're like the kings of rubber production.
Right.
But they've had some issues, bad weather and stuff. Production dropped unexpectedly.
So suddenly, less rubber for everybody. And if companies like Apollo Tires want to keep up with demand in a big market like India,
They've got a problem. And then there's the Red Sea thing, too.
oh, right, the Red Sea. Tell me about that.
There's this specific rubber. It's called TSR, Technical Specified Rubber.
Okay.
Most of it comes from the Ivory Coast. But with that Red Sea crisis, shipments got messed up, had to go all the way around Africa.
Wow.
Delays, costs, the whole 9 yards.
So it's like a double whammy for companies, less rubber overall, and what IS available?
It's more expensive to get. But then, get this, rubber prices actually fell.
Wait, they did. After all those problems.
17% drop in October. Crazy, right?
That is wild. What happened?
Well, with all the uncertainty, companies like Apollo Tires, they stopped buying as much. So there was too much stock.
Ah, supply and demand. Classic.
Exactly. And that's how the prices crashed.
So it's a roller coaster for these tire companies, huh?
Yeah.
Where do eco-friendly tires even fit into all of this? Isn't recycled rubber the solution to these supply problems?
Well, it's definitely something companies like Apollo Tires are looking into. I mean, India alone throws out a crazy amount of tires.
How many are we talking?
300,000 every single day.
That's a lot of tires. So that's a ton of potential recycled rubber just sitting there.
Exactly. Less reliance on natural rubber, better for the environment, maybe even cheaper in the long run.
Sounds like a win-win-win to me.
On the surface, sure.
Yeah.
But there are some hidden issues.
Like what? What are we missing?
TRWPs, tire and road wear particles.
TRWPs. What are those?
You know how your tires wear down a little bit every time you drive?
Yeah.
Those tiny bits of rubber that come off? Those are TRWPs. They're basically microplastics.
So even if we recycle the tires, we're still putting microplastics into the environment.
Unfortunately, yeah. And it's a huge amount. We're talking 6 million tons of this stuff every year globally.
6 million tons. So there's more to this than just using recycled rubber.
A lot more. And get this, remember that weird salmon die-off in Seattle a while back?
I think I vaguely remember that, yeah.
Researchers, they found a connection to this chemical called 6-PPD. It's in tires.
Okay, so tires are killing fish now. What's going on?
Well, the 6-PPD itself isn't the problem, but when it mixes with ozone, it changes into something else.
And that something else is what's toxic to fish.
Right, and that's what freaked everyone out. If it's hurting fish, what else could it be doing?
That's a good point. It's not just about the rubber anymore. It's all the chemicals involved. So what are companies doing about this 6-PPD thing, like Apollo Tires, for example?
They're definitely looking into it. They're focusing a lot on rolling resistance.
Rolling resistance? Can you explain that for me?
Sure. Imagine pushing a big box across a rough carpet. That's tough, right?
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort.
That's kind of like rolling resistance for tires. The harder it is for the tire to roll, the more energy it takes.
So high rolling resistance means the car burns more fuel.
Exactly. And here's where it connects back to 6-PPD and TRWPs. If you can lower the rolling resistance,
You use less fuel, and since the tires aren't working as hard?
they don't wear down as fast. Less TRWPs, less of that 6-PPD byproduct.
Okay, I see. So more efficient tires could actually help with this 6-PPD problem. But are companies trying to get rid of 6-PPD entirely?
That's the million-dollar question. And, well,
It's not that simple.
not at all. 6-PPD is really important for making tires last. Nobody wants tires that wear out after a few hundred kilometers.
Right, of course not.
So finding something else that works just as well but isn't bad for the environment, that's the tough part.
It sounds like finding a truly eco-friendly tire It's not just one problem to solve, it's like a whole bunch of them.
It really is. And the 6PPD thing, that shows just how complicated this whole sustainability thing is. It's not just about the materials, it's about the whole life of the tire, every ingredient, every step of the process.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, huh? There's always another layer.
Exactly. And 6PPD, that's a layer that needs some serious innovation.
Agreed. But before we get too deep into that, what about other solutions companies are working on? Didn't you mention Goodyear was doing something pretty ambitious?
They are. Goodyear, they want to make 100% sustainable tires by 2030.
Wow, 100%. That's a big goal.
It is. And they're not just talking about recycled rubber. They're looking at all kinds of stuff, even rice husk ash.
Rice husk ash. I don't think I've ever heard of that.
It's what's left over after you process rice. It's usually just thrown away.
And they're using it for tires. How does that even work?
It's pretty cool, actually. They can use it to make silica, which is important for how the tire performs.
So they're taking something that would have been wasted and turning it into something useful.
Yeah, it's like a full circle thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are other companies trying stuff like this with these alternative materials?
Oh, tons of them. Some are using recycled plastic bottles. Others are trying soybean oil instead of petroleum.
It's like the tire industry is suddenly getting a whole lot more creative.
They have to. But even with all this new stuff, that 6PPD problem, it's still a big hurdle.
Yeah, I can see that. Why is it so hard to replace or get rid of?
Think about it. Tire companies, they need to make tires that last, right? That's what people want.
Of course, yeah.
And 6PPD, it's great for that. But then there's the environmental impact. They're trying to find a balance.
It's like performance versus sustainability.
Exactly. And cost is a factor too, of course. New materials, new technology, it all costs money.
It's a complicated equation for sure.
But ignoring the problem, that's not an option either.
Definitely not. So what needs to happen? What are the next steps for making truly green tires?
A few things. More research, for one. We need to find that 6PPD replacement.
Right.
And we need better rules, maybe some incentives to help the tire industry be more sustainable.
Makes sense.
And this is important. People need to know about this stuff. The more consumers understand the issues.
The more they'll demand better tires, even if it costs a bit more.
Exactly. It's not just on the scientists or the companies, it's on all of us.
I like that. We're all in this together. But before we get too deep into what WE can do, I want to shift gears a bit. Let's talk about what happens to all those old tires, the ones we're trying to recycle.
That's where things get really interesting.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, India, they import a lot of used tires. Tons of them.
Really? What do they do with all those tires?
It's called pyrolysis. It's like a high-tech way of breaking them down and getting useful stuff out of them.
Pyrolysis.
Yeah.
Sounds intense. Break it down for me. What is that exactly?
So you take all these old tires and you heat them up a lot, but you do it without any oxygen.
Without oxygen, why?
Because with oxygen, things burn. We don't want to burn the tires. We want to break them down differently. This is called thermal decomposition.
So it's more like separating them at a molecular level, not just melting them down or something.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And what you get is you get these different byproducts: oil, gas, and something called carbon black.
Okay, so they're basically taking these old tires and extracting useful stuff from them. What happens to the oil, gas, and carbon black?
Well, the oil, it can actually be used as fuel.
Wait, really? You're telling me we can turn old tires into fuel?
Yep, pretty cool, right?
That is super cool. Less waste, Andy. We get fuel out of it.
2 birds, 1 stone.
I like it. What about the gas?
The gas can be used for a bunch of things, like generating electricity or heat.
So even more energy potential. Okay, well, what about this carbon black stuff?
Carbon black, that's good stuff. They use it in a lot of things, including, get this, new tires.
Wait, you're telling me they can take the carbon black from old tires and use it to make new ones?
Exactly. It's like closing the loop.
I love that. So we're not just recycling the rubber itself. We're taking these old tires and creating a whole bunch of valuable stuff from them. It's like tire alchemy.
I like that. Tire alchemy, that's a good one. But of course, there are some challenges with this process.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. There's got to be some downsides, right? What are the catches?
Well, one of the big ones is the energy. It takes a lot of energy to heat the tires up enough for this to work.
So you're using energy to create energy. That seems a little counterintuitive.
It's something to think about. The key is to make sure that energy is coming from clean sources.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What other potential downsides are there?
Well, depending on how it's done, pyrolysis can create pollution.
Ah, so we need to make sure it's done right.
Exactly. Strict regulations are super important. We need to make sure the process is as clean as possible.
Agreed. It sounds like pyrolysis has a lot of potential, but we need to be careful with it.
Definitely. And that's why research and technology are so important. People are always working on ways to make pyrolysis more efficient, cleaner, and cheaper.
That's good to hear. It seems like we're on the right track, but there's always more work to be done.
Always. And pyrolysis is just one part of this. We need to look at the whole life of a tire, from start to finish, if we want to make the industry truly sustainable.
So it's about taking a holistic approach, looking at the big picture.
That's it. And as consumers, we have a role to play in this too. Choosing the right tires, driving responsibly, supporting the companies that are doing things right, it all adds up.
I love that. It's a reminder that we're all in this together.
We are, but hold that thought, because before we get into what we can do as individuals, there's another piece of this puzzle we need to look at, and it's a big one. The 6PPD problem.
Okay, back to the 6PPD. For anyone who just tuned in, can you give us a quick reminder of what that is?
Sure, 6PPD, it's a chemical they put in tires, helps prevent them from cracking and breaking down, makes them last longer.
Sounds like a good thing.
It is, in a way. The problem is, it doesn't just stay in the tire. Tiny bits of it get released as the tire wears down.
Ah, so it ends up in the environment.
Yeah, and when it mixes with ozone in the air, it changes into something else. And that something is what's toxic to certain fish.
So it's not the 6PPD itself, but what it turns into, that's the problem.
You got it. And that's what's got everyone worried. If it's harming fish, what else could it be harming?
Yeah, that's a scary thought. So how do you fix that? I mean, tires need to be durable.
It's a real dilemma. We need tires that last, but we also need to protect the environment. And the 6PPD thing, it really highlights how tricky it is to get both.
All right, so what can we do about it? What are some of the solutions people are working on?
Well, one idea is to just use less 6PPD.
Less of it. Does that really make a difference?
It can help, but it's not ideal. Using less 6PPD, it might reduce the amount of that toxic stuff, but it could also mean the tires don't last as long.
Right. We don't want tires wearing out too quickly either.
Exactly. So another approach is to find something else entirely. Something that works just as well as 6PPD, but without the environmental risks.
So like find a replacement chemical.
Yep, something like that. But finding a good replacement that's affordable and doesn't have any other unintended consequences, that's not easy.
I bet. It sounds like a pretty big challenge.
It is. But there are companies out there working on this. There's a company in Finland, Nokian Tires. They're doing some interesting research on this.
That's good to hear. So if companies are working on this, why aren't we seeing these 6PPD alternatives in tires already?
Well, like most things, it comes down to money. Developing and testing new chemicals, it's expensive. And companies are often hesitant to spend a lot of money on things that might make their tires cost more, especially if consumers aren't demanding those changes.
That's true. People are always looking for the best deal.
Exactly. So it's important to raise awareness to make sure consumers understand these issues and are willing to support companies that are making an effort.
I like that. It's about making informed choices. So it's a mix of things, right? We need the scientists to come up with solutions, but we also need the companies to invest in those solutions, and that we need consumers to demand them.
That's it in a nutshell. It's a team effort.
It really is. But we're about out of time for this part of our deep dive. We'll be back soon to keep exploring the world of eco-friendly tires, including a closer look at some of those innovative solutions we talked about and what each of us can do to make a difference.
Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we were talking about 6PPD,
Yeah,
and
it's a tricky one. It really shows how tough it is to balance, making a good tire that lasts with making sure it's not hurting the planet.
it does. And it makes you think, right? There's so much we don't even consider about the stuff we use every day, like tires.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Speaking of things we don't consider, there's another piece of this whole eco-friendly tire thing we haven't really touched on yet. It has to do with, like, how the tires are actually made.
Yeah. The manufacturing process, that's key.
Exactly. So it's not just about recycled rubber versus new rubber. It's about...
It's about everything that goes into the tire, every ingredient.
So we need to look at the environmental impact of literally everything that makes up a tire.
That's the idea. And that's where it gets interesting. Remember we were talking about Goodyear? Their goal of making totally sustainable tires by 2030.
Yeah, 100% sustainable, that was ambitious.
It is, but they're trying all sorts of things to get there, like looking at different materials for all those different tire components.
You mentioned rice husk ash earlier. What's the deal with that?
Okay, so rice husk ash, it's basically what's left over when you process rice. Most of the time, it just gets thrown away.
Waste product.
Exactly. But Goodyear's figured out how to use it to make silica. Silica is really important for how the tire performs.
Wait, so they're taking something that's usually garbage and turning it into a high-tech tire ingredient? That's amazing.
Pretty neat, right? It's a perfect example of how companies are starting to think differently about this stuff. They're looking for ways to be more eco-friendly without sacrificing performance.
Love it. Turning trash into treasure. Are there other companies doing stuff like this using these, like, alternative ingredients?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Some are using recycled plastic bottles. Others are trying to use things like soybean oil instead of petroleum-based stuff.
Wow. So there's a whole world of new tire ingredients out there.
And it's just getting started. Who knows what they'll
Yeah.
come up with next?
It makes you wonder what LSC is out there that we could be using.
Right. It's exciting. But even with all these cool new materials and stuff, that 6 ppd problem, it's still a big one.
Yeah, that's not going away anytime soon, is it?
Yeah.
Why is it so tough to fix?
Well, think about it. When companies are trying to make tires better for the environment in every other way,
Yeah.
that 6 ppd thing, it kind of sticks out. It's like this contradiction.
Like you're building a house with all eco-friendly materials, but then you put in a leaky pipe that's full of toxic stuff.
Exactly. It just doesn't make sense. So companies know they can't really call their tires sustainable until they deal with the 6 ppd issue.
Right. So the research into alternatives, it's got to be a priority.
It is. They know it's not just about the environment, it's about their business too.
Makes sense. You mentioned Nokian Tires earlier, the company from Finland. They're one of the ones leading the way on this, right?
They are. Nokian tires, they're all about sustainability. They're putting a lot of resources into figuring this 6 ppd thing out.
What are they actually doing, though? What's their approach?
Well, they're trying a few different things. They're playing around with different chemical formulas, trying to find one that works without the bad side effects.
So it's like chemistry experiments, basically.
Kinda, yeah. But they're also looking at how they design the tires. Maybe there's a way to make the tire that releases less 6 ppd.
So it's not just about the chemicals themselves, it's about the whole structure of the tire.
Exactly. They're looking at it from all angles.
That's cool. Are other companies trying that too, the redesign approach?
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's a German company, Lanxess. They're big in the chemical world. They're working on new chemicals that they think could be good 6 ppd replacements.
And are they working with tire companies to actually get these new chemicals into tires?
Yep. They're working directly with the manufacturers, testing them out, making sure they work in real tires.
It sounds like there's a lot of potential there. But if these alternatives are out there, why isn't everyone using them already?
Well, money's a big factor, like always. All this research and development, it's not cheap. And companies, they need to make sure these new things won't make their tires too expensive.
Right, because at the end of the day, people got to be able to afford these tires.
Exactly. So that's why it's important for consumers to understand this stuff. The more people demand these eco-friendly options.
The more likely companies are to invest in them, even if it means the price goes up a little.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's all connected. Innovation, cost, what people want, it all plays a role.
It's a balancing act for sure.
It is. But as technology gets better and cheaper, those 6 ppd alternatives, they'll become more and more common.
That's good to hear. It feels like the tire industry is moving in the right direction, but it's clear there's still a long way to go.
Definitely. It's all about collaboration, trying new things, being open to change.
And patience, I imagine. These things take time.
Oh, yeah. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And it's a marathon we're all running together, Manufacturers, scientists, policymakers, consumers.
We are. Speaking of journeys, I want to shift gears one more time. Let's talk about the journey tires take once they're no longer usable. What happens to all those old tires?
Ah, the tire afterlife. That's a good one. We talked about pyrolysis, but there are actually a lot of different ways to deal with those old tires.
Okay, I'm all ears. What else can you do with a mountain of used tires?
Some of it's pretty cool, actually. One option is to shred them up into tiny pieces. It's called tire crumb.
Tire crumb, okay. What do they do with that?
All sorts of things. You can use it in asphalt, like for roads, makes them stronger and quieter. You can use it for playgrounds, sports fields, even landscaping.
So instead of ending up in a landfill, those old tires get to live on as part of our parks and roads.
Exactly. It's a great way to reduce waste and keep those materials in use.
I love that. So it's not just about recycling. It's about finding new uses for those materials.
That's the idea. And it gets even cooler. Some people are even building houses with old tires.
Wait, what? Houses? Out of tires? How does that even work?
It's called earthship construction. They take the tires, fill them with dirt, and use them as building blocks. Super strong, well insulated, and eco-friendly.
Wow, that's amazing. It's incredible what people can do with stuff we usually just throw away.
Right. It
Hmm,
shows you if you think creatively enough, there's a solution for just about anything.
I love that message. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to bring it back to something you mentioned earlier, the role of us, the consumers, in all of
Oh,
this.
yeah, that's super important. Consumers have way more influence than they think.
So what can we do besides, demanding those 6 PPD alternatives and maybe paying a bit more for eco-friendly tires?
One of the biggest things, honestly, is just being a smart driver.
I think we talked about this a little before, but can you give us some more detail?
Sure, things like, not slamming on the gas or brakes, keeping your speed steady, making sure your tires are inflated properly, all that stuff. It makes your tires last longer,
And if your tires last longer, you don't need to replace them as often.
which means less waste overall. It's a simple thing, but it makes a difference.
It's true. We don't always think about how our driving habits impact the environment.
We should. It's not just about what kind of tires you buy, it's about how you treat them too.
It's about making conscious choices, basically.
That's it. And when millions of people make those choices, it adds up.
It's like that ripple effect we were talking about earlier. It starts with us.
And who knows how far those ripples will go.
So as we wrap up this part of our conversation, let's encourage our listeners to think about their driving habits, to be informed consumers, and to speak up for a more sustainable tire industry.
Let's do it. We can make a difference.
We can. But we've got more to talk about. After the break, we'll be back to continue our exploration of eco-friendly tires. Stick with us.
Welcome back. It's amazing how much we've covered already. Salmon, tire alchemy, houses made of tires.
I know, right? It just shows you everything's connected.
Exactly. And that's what sustainability is all about. It's not just about changing one little thing. It's about looking at the whole system.
Yeah, seeing the big picture, thinking about how all these different pieces fit together.
Exactly. It's like what we do over here, it affects things over there. Everything's related.
Speaking of connections, we've talked a lot about companies and consumers, but what about the government? Don't they have a role to play in all of this too?
Oh, absolutely. Regulations, policies, those are super important. We can't just rely on people doing the right thing on their own. We need a framework to guide everything.
So what kind of rules or policies could help make the tire industry more sustainable?
Well, for one thing, we could have stricter rules about how you get rid of old tires. That would help keep them out of landfills.
Makes sense. What else?
We could have policies that encourage companies to use recycled rubber or those alternative materials we talked about.
Oh, and maybe even give people incentives to buy eco-friendly tires,
Yeah.
like tax breaks or something.
Yeah, exactly. Incentives are a great way to nudge people in the right direction.
So it's like a three-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Rules, incentives,
Yeah.
and awareness.
That's it. And when all those things work together, that's when you really start to see change happen.
It makes you realize sustainability, it's not just about doing the right thing, it's also an opportunity to innovate, to create new industries, to build a better future.
I like that. It's about seeing challenges as opportunities. It's about working together to come up with solutions that are good for the planet and the economy.
And it all starts with a change in how we think. Being willing to question things, to try new things, to believe that a more sustainable future is possible.
That's what it comes down to, believing it's possible
Yeah.
and then, actually doing something about it.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of eco-friendly tires, I want our listeners to walk away feeling hopeful. We've talked about the problems, the challenges, but we've also seen some incredible innovations.
And we've learned that we all have a role to play in making this industry more sustainable.
Whether it's buying eco-friendly tires, being mindful of how we drive, supporting the companies that are doing the right things, or speaking up for policies that make a difference.
Every little bit counts.
It really does. So next time you see a tire, don't just see a piece of rubber. See a symbol of innovation, of possibility, of our collective power to create a better future.
I like that. A symbol of a better future.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a more sustainable world.